Textual Builder Supply is pleased to present you with this recording of the technical question that is listed in the title of this video.
This call may be monitored and recorded for quality assurance.
Hey, Cory, can you hear me?
I can.
So what did you want to talk? You want to keep going with ricks and closers?
Let's do some stuff, Mr. Rich Soss hinges.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Okay. So Soss hinges, sure.
I actually had a client call yesterday who was in the Naples area and asked for 5 or 6 inch Soss hinges. It was something we had in stock, and I realized that wasn't something that was actually usually listed in the part numbers or the descriptions. I had to look at dimensions and whatnot, and yeah, so it's a little topical. Very good.
In terms of someone telling you what size they want? Yeah, Soss hinges, they don't run that way. The way that they run is just knowing how thick the door is, and how thick the door is determines which hinge you use. So Soss has they've got their standard Soss hinge, but then they've got a lot of derivatives of stuff. And the way that you start with Soss is, and it's super easy. Let me get to it. Okay, so I don't like any of that. Okay. So while I'm finding the page that I want to land on, the Soss hinge is like the original hinge, the original concealed hinge. And what Soss has said that they'll never do is make one that can be adjusted like you can with Tectus or McKinney or Sugatsuni and other people who make these things. When it comes to a Soss hinge, the important part that you're dealing with is how thick the door is, and when you know the thickness, you just basically have to stick with what that is. So if it's 1 3/4 inch thick door, which is obviously going to be pretty common, you're going to deal with a Soss hinge that's going to handle that. So the way that they deal with that is by telling you what the minimum thickness a particular hinge will accommodate. So if someone says, I need Soss hinges, the first question is how thick is the door? And once you know that door thickness, you then can say, if someone said, well, it's 1 3/8, well, okay, you can use the 216, you can use the 212, and you can use other hinges that will work on that minimum material thickness, but you can't use the 218 or the 220 because the door is too thin for it. So in many instances, you're dealing with a 218 Soss hinge for 1 3/4 inch thick application. So question 1 is, I need a Soss hinge. Great, how thick is the door? And then you go from there. Now,
okay.
What's important to know is, okay, so this is page 1, let's say, where there are different Soss hinges. And as you go from left to right, from page 1 and then to page 2, they simply get bigger. And what that means is the minimum door thickness continues to increase as you go along. If you've not hit subscribe yet, we would very much appreciate if you did, and hopefully you're enjoying this video. Now, let's get back to it. So, if someone were to say, yeah, I need a 5-inch Soss hinge, well, you can look at the height of the hinge. So this 220 is 5.5. The 218 is 4 5/8. That's your height. as it is for the 216, as you can see. So that doesn't, if they're telling you that it's for sure it's 4.5 inch, they say, well, it's not a 220, and it's not a 212, so it's got to be a 216 or a 218. And then you end up saying, well, how thick is your door? And then select the one that's either for 1 3/8 or 1 3/4 minimum thickness.
Okay.
So my goal is to just, you walk away with an understanding of this is what it takes to get someone a Soss hinge that's going to work. So what's your door thickness? That's always the first question. Then after that, because the catalog to me is a little clunky, but I'm not going to close it because I'm not in it all the time. On our manufacturer's page, there's this thing called a nomograph, and this is going to be the second document that you go to, the nomograph. The nomograph is pretty cool because all it tells you is how many hinges to use. It looks complicated, but not to a guy like you. When you study this, and actually I use the nomograph usually only for selecting the hinge because it tells you the minimum door thickness. So here's going to be your door width, here's going to be your door weight, and then just follow a line across those two intersections and then go straight across. So really common for 1 3/4 thick doors to be at a 218. That's an extremely typical hinge. The 212 is as well if you're dealing with smaller or thinner doors. And speaking of the nomograph, the person I think who basically invented this hinge said, I don't care how heavy the door is, keep throwing Soss hinges at it. And I can tell you that I've done jobs where we have hung, the last one I did was kitty corner from Trump's building in Manhattan, the one that's got the green facade look, just south of Central Park. And we did a door there, kitty corner from there. So if you know Manhattan, then you have an idea of where I'm talking about. That door was 14 gauge, like a 4090, and then it was lined with 12 gauge stainless on both faces. So that door was several hundreds of pounds, and we hung that sucker on 5 Soss 220s. Just worked all day long. Absolutely. So first of all, what's the door thickness? Second, you have to determine how many are needed, and that's what the nomograph is for. Now,
let me interject something here. I haven't looked at that nomograph before, and I couldn't figure out why that line was going that direction. Why is it diagonal? And now I realize you just follow the width by the weight and draw a line with a ruler, and it takes you to where you need to go. Correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
So my mouse is going to be like right at, let's say for a 36-inch door, and let's say that door is 150 pounds right up here. So I'm literally just coming across, and I'm going to be at 3. They'll tell you 4 for that sort of application. 3 is going to work all day long. So that's all you do with this. And three's going to be really good for 7 foot. Follow the normal conventions when it comes to the quantity of hinges. But having said that, Soss has, and you want to be kind of mindful to obey what the manufacturer says. And what I mean by that is there are several documents here. Hinge location. They're going to tell you where they want the hinges located. And if you've ever been on a cruise, or if you've been to Mexico, or anywhere outside of the United States generally, you'll see hinges biased towards the top of the door because the majority of weight that the hinge is hanging is up here. So what I said another way, the majority of the door is below the top hinge. So that's easy to understand. The majority of this door is below this top hinge. So the majority of the weight, therefore, is below that top hinge. So Soss says, no, not this top, center, and bottom. We want 2 at the top, because that's where the majority of weight is being borne by. And engineer at PEMCO once said, when talking about continuous hinges, 70% of the door weight is held by that top hinge. So if you walk into a place and you see butt hinges, always take a look at the top hinge versus the middle and bottom. And if there's wear, you'll definitely see it a lot clearer on that top hinge. That's just proof of that is true. So where Soss wants you to bias them is definitely towards the top. And if I was doing a job and hanging stuff on Soss, I would follow what the manufacturer says, but not necessarily Soss. I would follow what the door manufacturer says, because if you had any problem with the door, you don't want the rope around your neck to be that you improperly hung the door. So if I was doing wood doors with Soss 218s, I would ask the manufacturer if they to express in writing that the door maintains warranty with the hinges put like this. Because that would be an important thing to be able to have in writing if you deviated from the industry standard of top, middle, and bottom.
Right.
So in the Soss catalog, there are several derivative products. And derivative products, obviously for fire-rated openings. You want to be really careful with that because you can't necessarily get a Soss fire-rated hinge for everything that you want to do. You have to really, if you're going to do a fire-rated door on Soss, you need to read this because there could be a gotcha in the sense that there could be an application where you can't do it. Their power transfer. Yeah, okay. So here's if you want to do a power transfer hinge, they don't have one that's above 20 minute. So you've got to read this. If your door is fire rated and you're using Soss, be aware of what the manufacturer has been tested to provide. And yeah, really important right here. Yep, this is it. So I was doing a job that were 309s on Soss, and I called Soss and said, hey, listen, your catalog clearly says you've only tested up to 4080. What about 3090? And they said, well, we've not tested for that yet, but we're about to. And this was maybe 2 years ago. And they hadn't tested for the hinges at that point, and they were 90-minute doors. So, and I explained that to the client. Listen, they've not yet tested. They're going to. What do you want me to do? The guy's like, don't worry about it. I'll prep the hinges here. So he bought fire doors from us without labels, and he machined everything himself. You know, he wanted the door to be fire rated, but we couldn't put a label on it because, I mean, there's ways around that, but we couldn't properly put a label on it. You can, if you were to order a fire door and tell the manufacturer of the fire door that you don't want any door prep in it, well, that's a problem because NFPA 80 says the door has to be prepped by the licensed machiner, and that's not the guy in the field with a hammer and chisel. But if you were to tell the factory that you don't want any prep for hardware, they'll say, well, we can't do that. And you'll say, well, okay, what if it was a rim exit device and a full mortise continuous hinge? There's no hardware prep for that stuff. They could supply you with a blank fire door that has a label on it. The problem is it's going to have two labels on it. The second label is going to say, this is for surface-mounted hardware only. So if the inspector knows what he's looking at and says, well, wow, you got Soss hinges prepped on this door has clearly been field modified because the factory refused to do it. So when you get into these derivative products for Soss, it's just a matter of knowing what they can do and what they can't do. When it comes to their fire-rated hinges, if you've got a fire door and you're doing Soss, you have to order the fire-rated version of it because it's not like a steel or stainless steel ball-bearing butt hinge. You've got to list it as the fire-rated version. So
okay.
The other thing, and I just want to touch on derivatives before we get into just a couple of things that you need to be mindful of. So
Can I dig in real quick on something you just mentioned?
No, go right ahead.
Because I think you just taught me something. I was under the impression that if something was UL labeled, even if you put UL listed stuff on it after the fact in the field, it wasn't going to be labeled anymore. But it sounds like you said if an inspector, or AHA or whoever the appropriate governing body actually inspects that and sees that it was originally labeled and then had fire listed products installed, that it could be considered a fire rated door.
So as long as you're installing individual components from different manufacturers and all of their individual components have been tested, they're either listed, meaning UL has approved it for use on a fire door, or it physically bears a UL label, and not like your toaster. Your toaster has a UL label, but the bottom line is, as long as the manufacturer of that hardware has had it tested and it's passed the test, UL will then grant them permission to mark their hardware as UL listed and appropriate for use on fire door assemblies. So as long as everything that goes on that assembly is kosher, then you're good. A non-rated Soss, a fire-rated Soss hinge on a 9-foot door is not kosher, because a fire door inspector could look at that and say, wait a minute, I never knew that Soss could do that sort of stuff. And very often what happens is these manufacturers, they're going to, these people who do that sort of field inspections, if they're good at it, they'll say, oh, you can't do that. Or you've got an exit device and it doesn't have a UL label on it. Oh, you can't do that. So there's a problem with it. But as long as everything that's on there is either listed and or labeled, you're good. Like if you've got a fire door and you've got a door viewer, a good inspector is going to tell the engineer of the building, pull that viewer out of the door and show me the label. So when you look at door viewers, there are door viewers and then there are UL listed door viewers. So as long as you're using the right one on there, you're good. Okay. Everything has to be just listed. If it's listed, everything that is permissible for use on a fire door is listed. Meaning the guy at UL in Northbrook, Illinois, can walk over to his filing cabinet, right? Open it up and flip through folders and get to that section of whatever hardware and pull it out and say, yep, that's a 653M, or 652M or a 615R. That's their designation for the fact that piece of hardware has been tested. It literally was put onto a fire test and it was burned and survived. The opening survived. And what hardware manufacturers do is they gang up. So the hinge guy and the closer guy and the lock guy, they all say, hey, you want to test your closer, I want to test my exit, and you want to test your hinge. Let's all go in together and split the cost into a third. And they do that. Right. And that's how that works. The sticky part that I've been told is when the closer guy's stuff fails and the other two guys don't get a passing grade on the test. So and those fire tests are, several, they're over $10,000 or something like that. Yeah. So
that's the number I've always heard was like 10,000 for it. So yeah, that's I've heard of that in the fire industry as well. Teaming up with stuff. So It's amazing how many conflicts I see their potential when all the hardware has to be labeled and listed and work in conjunction with each other, and even just the fact that you refer to the door manufacturer on these hinges, it's I'm seeing how there can be so many conflicts and reasons to have somebody that knows what they're doing on these door inspections, because it's a very not incredibly complex, but there are things to check, so that's very interesting.
I tell people, I'm not the code police, but I'm obligated to tell you what it is and what it's not, and you make your own decisions. You're the owner or owner's representative. To take the codes and standards class through DHI and then take the FDAI, CF, whatever it is, the fire door assembly inspector class, that's good. You'll go through all 12 or 14 points of what are on the, or what is on the list of things that you inspect when you're standing at an opening. However, that's also listed in NFPA 80, so you don't need to take the class to know what you have to inspect, and everything's in that document. You don't have to have letters after your name to do that. You just and in fact, if someone called and said, yeah, we're a hospital and we've got 12 openings that we need to have inspected, I would say, yeah, sure, it's X dollars per opening, and I would just show up with NFPA 80, and I would refresh my memory of, okay, yeah, right. I'm checking for gaps. I'm checking for holes. I'm checking for things that would be problematic, like if you've got a sign on a door, it can be only up to, I think, 1 square foot or something like that. I forget what the cutoff is, but you're looking for nuances. If there's glass, you're making sure that the glass is fire rated, and you're not there to fail them. You're just there to observe and report. That's all you're doing. So that's very interesting stuff, though, because it does really matter, and it does open your eyes to, everything on the opening has to play well together. So other derivative hinges from Soss, the most common is the IC, the invisible closer. And we sold some of these to a guy in Naples a couple of months ago, and he called me late last week and said, hey, so the way that you set the tension on this is this bolt runs all the way through here, and you can get access to it right here. And imagine, as if we're looking in this leaf, the head of it's right here. It's right here, and you can get to it with an Allen screw. And the guy says, boy, I'm turning that long bolt, and I'm not getting tension. Well, this neural disc that's back there, I told him, tighten that down a little bit so it actually makes contact with the back of the spring. Because as you tighten that bolt, it forces the spring to compress. And obviously when the door opens, this whole assembly is going to pull that bolt from rest here out, compressing the spring further. Mario Tricosi, certainly a very famous chain of salons in the United States at least. We've done jobs where they did 218 ICs. We have them in stock. I don't love them because it's just a spring, hydraulic control governing the rate of release of stored energy in the spring would be great, but people use them, and there you go. And like I said, we stock them, so you can mate your 216s, your 18s, your 220s with a closer version of that hinge. So that's something that you'll find fun. So this Hercules that we've gone past a couple of times, everything is the same in terms of hinges and whatnot. It's a hinge. It's just their Hercules hinge. The issue is the reason to the reason to know about the Hercules hinge is when you look at this nomograph. Let's look at the standard hinge nomograph one more time. And I don't know what the term, the definition of nomograph, I don't think it's in my dictionary. But the standard hinge nomograph tops out at 500 pounds. The Hercules hinge, it's not even breaking a sweat at 500 pounds.
Right.
Okay, so if you're dealing with obscenely heavy doors, you're going to deal with a Hercules hinge, and then most likely a whole lot more of them. And you see here the quantity of hinges in this vertical column. But at the end of the day, you got an 800-pound door. Yeah, obviously use pivots for that. You don't want to? Awesome. I got the hardware for you, and it's been tested. And we probably keep a little bit of this. So that's a derivative specialty product. Another one is their wide throw hinge that they have. And while I'm going to get there, the other thing is they do make, as you possibly know, stainless steel versions. So you can do stainless steel versions of their hinges. If you're dealing with an exterior application, I think you could very easily make an argument for non-ferrous base material because on a typical Soss, you're going to have zinc base material, but you're going to have steel as well. I did a job, the Mass Transit Authority in the country of Qatar. There were all kinds of concealed hinges there, and they were all 316 stainless. They weren't Soss, they were Tectus, because they wanted the the stuff was going to the Middle East. Tectus is a German company. They wanted to use European hardware, so it worked out really well for them. But the point of the matter is you can do stainless steel versions of this stuff. Now they do have their wide throw material, and I'm wondering where their wide throw material is. Obviously power transfer. You have to be really careful of power transfer material to make sure that it will handle. I mean, they put it in bold for a reason, because you can easily run more amperage through there than what it's rated for. So 2.5 amps at 24 volts. You could, if you've got something solenoid driven, you could have an inrush of a lot more amperage. And they get into these, not specialty hinges, they're Soss, but they're for smaller things. They're for furniture applications. Soss has their barrel hinges, and they're neat because they would be used on really small, thin doors. All you do is drill a round hole, and they're cool. People will buy those. Minimum door thickness right here. Yeah, so if you're dealing with really thin, really light material. Now, so they have wide throw hinges, and wide throw hinges really are not a wide throw hinge in the sense that you and I think of them as. And I want to get to, I think that catalog that I have open is just a much older catalog. So a Soss wide throw, and we do keep these hinges in stock. What the Soss wide throw hinge is intended for is this application. So if you have, just imagine a 30-foot wide wall, and you've got trim that's making it look like you've got, 3-foot spaces between the surface applied molding just to give it some sort of a look. They use this wide throw hinge basically to disguise the fact that there's a door there. So if you imagine in your mind's eye and elevation all this paneling, that you had trim applied on both sides of the opening, you would use the wide throw hinge in the sense that you'd be able to clear that.
Okay.
So it's definitely wide throw in the sense that it will clear the clearance, and it is possible to use it for that application, but that's really not what it's for, because this is where you would get into trouble, because trim would normally come all the way out here and be attached here. This would not handle that very well right in here. So Soss makes a wide throw, and it does throw the door out, but it's not the definition of wide throw that you and I have discussed, because of how it goes through because of how the pivot point goes through its arc. Pivot point is here, now it's here, now it's here, so it does a really weird ellipse is what it does.
Right, okay.
So that takes me to the super important part of knowing when you use a Soss hinge, knowing that when you use a Soss hinge, you are now required to understand what you're dealing with. And what that means is this clearance detail document. So Soss has drawn up, and I have asked them for a CAD drawing so I could rotate objects in AutoCAD, but they don't have one for their hinge because their vertical axis of pivoting isn't like a butt hinge. That point right there,
right.
What is the vertical axis of pivoting? I imagine that it does, again, some sort of weird ellipse. So what's important about this is, in all of these instances, these columns, 1, 2, 3, and 4, you get the idea that that's your pinch point right there. And what's important with that is, and I've mentioned it countless times, I just have come to call it the E dimension is what I call it. And the E dimension is this right here. You cannot exceed the E dimension, and if you do, something's gonna hit. Even when you maintain the E dimension, your door and jamb get so close to each other that it's really beyond the ability to measure in the field. So how you become comfortable with knowing where your E dimension is just simply like this. For every Soss hinge that we sell, there's going to be a template. So let's look at any Soss hinge, and every time that you see a Soss hinge, you can always see a template. And the template gives you all of the dimensions of what you're going to mortise. And these Soss hinges are actually super easy. They're super easy. If you erased off of this document everything you didn't need to see, it'd be a lot easier to see. All you need to know is how wide is it, how tall is it. But you have two preps here. Call this the body prep. Call this the plate prep. Do your body prep from here down, up back here. It's going to be 1.125 wide. So do your body prep. Then go back and do your face prep. 4 5/8, 1.125, and you do it just to the depth or the thickness that you need. So 13/32 on the plate, and then whatever the depth is for the body. Okay, well we can just, it's right here, 1 40, 1/64, whatever. Put that into decimal, and that'll be how deep you prep the body. So do your 1.125 wide, 2 15/32 by 1 40, 1/64. Then come back and do 1.125 wide, 4 5/8 tall, and then 13/32 deep. Now you've got the prep for the face. Or you've got the prep for the hinge. It'll fit right in. A prep for a latch bolt, Cory, is the same. You got a plate prep, a rectangular plate prep, usually, and then you've got a hole that's drilled behind it. There are two preps you do for a latch bolt, and all we've done is just said this is the same. Now, the only thing that must be done is the E dimension, and on the 218, it's a 1/4 inch. It's right here. It's and it's difficult to look at here, but on the pull side of the opening, when the door's closed and you're going to pull it to open it, the hinge must be within a 1/4 inch of the face of the jamb and the face of the door. If you have it further away, if this dimension is bigger, the hinge isn't going to install in the sense that, well, it'll install, but now you're going to close this gap up. When you close up the gap, that's where you're going to have a problem with the 1/64 of an inch. Sorry, I'm losing all my tabs. You get into a problem of your 1/64 of an inch on the clearance detail. So when this is too large, this all gets smushed together and it's going to hit. So when it comes to Soss, don't let people panic in the sense of, oh, I can't understand how to do that. And people therefore want to order the substantially more expensive Tectus concealed hinge because they can adjust it. Well, the bottom line is, how about this? Follow the template, buy hinges that are at least as robust, 1/3 the cost, and if you're going to prep a door and frame for hinges, guess what you have to get right? The vertical locations. This is no different. You have to get the height and the thickness of the hinge prepped correct. That's the same. The only other thing is your back set cannot exceed the E dimension, and every one of these Soss templates has an E dimension. So you can skin that cat a couple of different ways, as you can see in their drawing, but you just can't violate it. Otherwise the door's not going to open. It'll open and it'll crush the material on the outside. You'll damage it. If you've not hit subscribe yet, we would very much appreciate if you did, and hopefully you're enjoying this video. Now, let's get back to it. Now, when you get into doing Soss and you're dealing with other hardware, like a door closer, if you look at the installation instructions for a door closer, you're always referencing off of the pivot point or the center of the hinge barrel. When you're doing Soss, and other pieces of hardware. You have to have the factory review and determine if standard templating applies. And where it actually applies is with overhead door stops and holders by Glenn Johnson or Rickson, or other people that make those. Because the vertical axis of pivoting is the datum, your origin point. Soss messes with the datum a little bit, so you've got to get a review for that. And sometimes it costs more money to buy that same hardware when you have to have a special template applied to it. So that's a real deep dive when it comes to Soss hardware. In terms of how it plays nicely or not nicely with other hardware. And then other than specialty products, the wide throw, the power transfer, the fire rated, the Hercules, they also sell, and we stock a lot of it, the stuff that you'll use to mortise the door and frame for. So these template kits we stock, and they're really easy in terms of selling the stuff to people. What has to occur when you sell Soss material is, what has to occur when you sell the installation equipment for Soss material is the router bit and the guide that goes into the base of the router must be appropriate for the hinge and for the template that you're using, because these are 220. Okay. So what we're dealing with here is let's look at a a 218 IT. And this has a particular height and width in the preparation. Okay? This is a specific height and width. When you drop your router in there, the diameter of the guide and the diameter of the router bit must be the correct specified bit and guide for the template. Otherwise, the hinge won't fit. Because your router guide that the router bit goes through sucks up some of that room, meaning this needs to be bigger to account for that router guide. So the point of the matter is, if someone says, yeah, I need the hinges, but can you sell me the template kit as well? Absolutely, I can. You need the wooden poplar templates, and then you need the guide and the bit. And if you recall, I had mentioned about the body prep and the plate prep. These are just two drywall screws. So I would first do the body prep, and your guide basically bumps up against these drywall screws that are here. And when it's time to do the plate prep, you pull them out and you do the whole plate prep. So that just proves it's a two-step situation. Their templates literally made for it to be a two-step situation. So with Soss, first question is, how thick is your door? And then after that, how heavy is your door? And then if you're dealing with garden variety Soss, that's all you need to know other than finish.
Right.
People use in the decades that I've sold Soss hinges. One guy about 3 years ago called up and said, "Yeah, I got a defective Soss hinge," and I said, "Wow, in 30 plus years, you're the first person who's ever said that." Well, it turns out that they use these Soss 208 hinges, and that's in the catalog, for a bookcase. Well, the two 10-year-old kids climbed up the bookcase and sat on top of it and bent one of the Soss hinges. So, yeah, not really defective. The rest of the links that you'll find, and we've done a pretty good job with Soss supporting documentation. Hinge sizing chart, that's probably the nomenclature. Well, maybe it's not. Hinge sizing chart. Yeah, that's the nomograph. Then we have the 90-degree open. These are just the clearance detail things that we looked at. The hinge location, that's that document we first looked at with biasing them towards the top, right. And then your template.
Right.
And people, again, they shy away from Soss because it looks too complicated, and it just isn't. I could pretty quickly draw up in my CAD CAM software just showing what that prep needs to look like. It's just super easy. So again, you tell your guy, prep this one, reset your depth and prep this one, and do that on the door and frame. Your vertical locations have to be correct, but never should you shy away from a Soss job and understanding it, because all of the documentation is there. You just have to study it, one. Two, your coworkers are there that understand it, me. Three, the factory's always available, in the sense of, I think, I understand it very well. I have complete competency in being able to explain to people how Soss works. So if you're dealing with something, I think the thing is to just, if you're not sure of what you need, you call me. But Soss hinges are beautiful. They're elegant. They're concealed. You don't see them. They're capable of great weight. They're inexpensive comparatively. And their only downside is you're not going to get away with a huge clearance. You're not going to get away with chair rail and have to go to past 90 degree. You could have chair rail come up to here, but you won't get that door open any further. So that's the limitation with Soss, that you're not going to get 180 degree when you've got a clearance problem, because in here you've got very little gap. It's actually right here, 3/8 door clearance. That's what you have to be mindful. And even if you had vinyl baseboard, vinyl self-adhesive base, that's, you'll see in crappy retail areas, that stuff's not 3/8 thick, but you can't put much baseboard on the walls and get away with 180 degree with a Soss hinge.
Right.
Just not going to work.
Right. So I got a question. I saw someone in chat last week that mentioned they shied away from Soss hinges and they're more inclined to the adjustable. And when I was thinking about that, I thought, well, if it's adjustable, it seems like there might be more variables to get right. But it sounds more like if you don't install it, well, that's probably not the right way to phrase it, if you don't install it correctly. But there's more leniency where you can adjust it based on how you install it, whereas Soss, you have to do it as it is and it will work perfectly. But if you're not confident, you're going with the adjustable because of that, essentially. Is that more or less kind of on track?
That's definitely what people will tell you. My counter argument is, well, aren't you going to endeavor to be within a 32nd of an inch of where you need to mortise? Because your adjustability, when you put the hinge at the proper vertical height on the door and frame, there's no reason to ever adjust it vertically. That Soss hinge, unless you have two 10-year-old boys sitting on top of the door, you're not going to damage it. So if you get that right, and then if you get the E dimension right, why would you ever need to adjust it? They're never going to come out of alignment. I'm highly suspect of a hinge that's adjustable and that the X, Y, and Z axis can be governed by a mechanical bolt. You ever have a hinge screw come loose at home? Yep, I sure have. You ever had a door lock get loose? Yep, I sure have. Are you really telling me that you want the piece of hardware that's hanging your 200-pound door to be governed by screws with some thread lock on the threads? I don't. Right. I'm thinking to myself, it's a lot cheaper just to double check your dimensions and use Soss hinges, the original. And there's a reason that they've not made an adjustable version. And it's because there really isn't one necessary. If you're a carpenter and you're dealing with Soss hinges, you're probably a finish carpenter, meaning you're not putting up studs. You're doing trim work. You're using a miter box saw. You're doing compound cuts. You're putting up crown molding. And if you can do that stuff, you can mortise a hinge in the right place. So when you study the Tectus, you can get some play in terms of its lateral movement, its height adjustment slightly. But if you've ever had a piece of furniture that had European-style continuous hinges, European-style concealed hinges, you can tweak those a little bit. But it's crazy to tweak those because you set it one way and now the door's over too far. It's like just put the hinge in the right spot and you're good. Right. And the only people that say they want to triple their cost on a hinge are those that aren't comfortable with their level of skill. And I'm here to say, you know what, man? Get a 2x4 and practice first. cut a couple, and then you'll be an expert. That's all it takes. If you've not hit subscribe yet, we would very much appreciate if you did, and hopefully you're enjoying this video. Now, let's get back to it.
I mean, it doesn't seem like the prep should be too much different either way. It seems like it's just built in for any sort of error.
I mean, the adjustable hinges, you can shift the door up and down, in and out, and back and forth a little bit, but not a substantial amount. I mean, you don't get that much oops with them. You still have to be really accurate with where you mortise stuff.
Right.
Okay. It's just hard for me to understand. So here's the software. Let's just do OK. Let's do radius 0.5625. Nope. Yeah, okay, that's fine. Oh. Kind of looks like a Soss hinge, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, look at that.
Yep. Now let's do this. This won't be even because I'm just eyeballing it. Okay. Yeah, you can tell it's not even, but it doesn't matter. Now we come over to the cam side, cam side of the software. Let's select this vector and let's do a pocket profile. We're going to go in 3/8 of an inch. We use a 1/4 inch on mill. Let's just do that. Okay, great. Now let's do awesome. Now actually, let's do this. Let's take a rectangle. I'm working on my little laptop, so it's a bit weird.
Understood.
Let's do a pocket, and let's do 1 inch on that. Calculate. Okay. Let's go to toolpath, let's go to simulation quality, let's reset. So now I've just drawn and I visualized what that prep needs to look like. So I've done 2 preps. I did the body prep. I did it in reverse order. The way I selected the vectors is all that governed that. But there's the body prep, and then there's the plate prep. And that's all you're doing. Reset preview. Preview visible toolpath. And this is literally what I would do with a router. That's your plate prep. Now we'll do the body prep. Reset the preview.
Oh wow.
Preview selected.
Yeah, looking at that template with all those different dimensions, it definitely seemed like there was more to take into account. But like you said, there might be some things on there that aren't necessarily needed. Because yeah, that doesn't look too terribly complicated.
It's definitely not. It's not. And so here's the bottom line. What you got to be sure to get right is the top of the door to the top or the center line of the hinge. That's one. Number 2, your E dimension. If this is the pull side of the door, that dimension can't be greater than 1/4 inch. If you keep it to within 1/4 inch, you're done. Take the 2/3 of money that we just saved you and go to Vegas. But right. It's nice to be able to toss something into this because it does help people visualize. And I've done. I have an order for a major movie studio, and I'm not going to say it because of the obvious reason. I took an order from them yesterday, and let me show it to you. And the way that I sold the job, they want some custom pull handles, and Hager didn't have them in stock, and we didn't have a version that would work for what they did. We had pull handles that would work, but they weren't the right shape. So let's look, content. I'm pulling it up on another monitor.
Right. While you're looking for that, since I got one question written down, just to confirm, essentially that E dimension that we keep talking about, that's more or less the clearance, is that right?
Yeah, that's the dimension from, if you stand in front of the door, and the door's in the closed position, and the door's on the pull side of the opening, if you put your hand on the face of the door, and it's 1 3/4 thick, you can't, the hinge back set can't be greater than 1/4 inch, or it can't be greater than the E dimension, because the E dimension is 1/4 inch on the 218. That's not what it necessarily is on others. Well, it's not what it is on other hinges. Okay. So this is the 4 pull handles that I'm going to make for this major movie studio. So all I did yesterday to sell it to them while I was on the airplane was I drew this simulation. So they're going to be 10-inch center-to-center pulls. That's going to be a piece of 1-inch thick aluminum that's 12-inch tall and 8-inch wide. And they want 4 of them, so I simply nested them. And there's so many tool paths because it's aluminum. You can only go, your pass depth can only be so great. So here I am speeding it up basically. So when I get back, next week I've got to make these. And the reason I'm showing this to you is if you get a customer and they're struggling with understanding how to do it, one way to make it real easy is to make a simulation like this. And I'll be speeding it up right about here now. There are four pulls. I nested them to get the greatest yield out of a single piece.
Right.
And here are your 4 pull handles as I get rid of the material that doesn't make sense. What I'll do at that point is I'll drill and tap the backside of the poles for typical Rockwood SP1025 bolts or SP1004 bolts, and that's what they're going to look like. Solid bar stock aluminum, solid aluminum plate. That's going to be So again, the purpose of that is to say, hey, the guy wants to order 80 Soss hinges from us. Can you put that into a visualization for him? Yeah, you bet I can. Whether it's using AutoCAD for something, or it's using a piece of software like VCarve Pro, which, by the way, is free if all you're going to do is... you can't generate machine code with a free version, but what you can do is what I just did for free.
Okay.
Not hard to learn how to use. Some, a little bit of YouTubing. YouTube University will get you there. So this blue part means I've cut through the material. I was giving it random values, but yeah. So I would, so at the end of the day, how thick is your door? Awesome. How heavy is your door? Then you know how many hinges. Then you need to know what finish. And that's it. You're done. Oh, a specialty Soss hinge? What are we talking about? Power transfer, closers? We're talking about fire rated? We're talking about stainless steel? We're talking about wide throw? Awesome. Oh, you want tools to help you install it? Got it. Oh, you need a guy to actually help you visually understand it? Bingo. So 5 points. You can hit the customer on all 5 of those points. No problem. You got it. It's just because it's a technical piece of hardware, it's not beyond the grasp of understanding. It just isn't.
Right. Awesome. All right. Anything else? I mean, I think we did a good overview.
Yeah, no, and like I said, so what's up next? Someone calls for Soss, tackle it, get the questions. If you don't understand what you're trying to answer, you know the 3 things I'm going to say: catalog, coworker, manufacturer, tech support. That's just how you do it. You do the research here first, and when you're stuck, you phone a friend.
Okay, awesome. Alrighty, this is fantastic.
All right, buddy.
Thank you very much, Rich.
I'll talk to you.
All right, talk soon.
Bye.
All right, bye now.
Architectural Builders Supply hopes you have enjoyed this program. Please click thumbs up, please subscribe, and maybe even send the video to someone that you know. Thank you.